Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is a comic book powerhouse. He has written for
Oh,
Conan, the Avengers, Thunderbolts, Dungeons and Dragons, and so many more. He's worked with nearly every single comic book publisher out there. Please welcome the one and only Jim Zub to Epic Realms. How are you doing?
hey, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm doing good. How are you?
I am very good. I'm very excited and glad to have you on the show. Your name's
Awesome.
come up a lot on this show via other guests or maybe behind the
Oh,
scenes
thanks.
from other guests or
Hmm.
them interrupting me being like, "Oh my god, Jim's awesome." And
That's
and
very
you've
kind.
seen
Very
you've
cool.
seen the clip that I posted with James Sutter. I mentioned to you before the show,
Yeah,
B. Dave
he's amazing.
Walters. How is it
Yep.
for you to get these accolades from other people within the geek world that are like Jim's awesome, Jim does all these cool things? How is
I
that for you?
mean, the whole thing is surreal. Honestly, I grew up, in a little city east of Toronto, like about an hour drive east of Toronto, a little place called Oshawa. And I was just a huge, gaming nerd and comic book nerd growing up. And for me, like the dream would have been to meet people that work in those industries. I never in a million years thought that, this would be my career, let alone be well regarded and, get to meet so many of my heroes and get to become friends with so many amazing creators and peers. Like the whole thing is such a surreal ride. Like I really do have to pinch myself so often because of how crazy it is. Like literally in 2 days, I'm getting on a plane and I'm flying to India for the very first time for a comic convention. Like it's just mind bending to me that I get to travel all around the world, that I get to work on these cool projects, that I get to meet other people that do it, and of course all the readers and gamers and stuff everywhere. So yeah, for me it's just a constant kind of a rush. It's a wild one. I don't even know how to put it into words sometimes. Yeah.
Nice. I have to ask you this. When you were growing up, was it comics or was it role playing that kind of came first for you?
Um That's a good question. I think, geez, they were pretty neck and neck. It would be hard for me to say. They were both very, very powerful kind of influence on my life. Like all of it kind of came from my older brother, who's sort of my primordial nerd. Like he was 4 years older than me, and I was, the real formative stuff starts when I'm like 8 years old, because that's when I start playing Dungeons and Dragons, and that's when we start collecting Marvel comics really hardcore. And so again, those things are really, really kind of neck and neck for me. We would play Dungeons and Dragons all the time. My parents used to have a cottage kind of north of Peterborough, and we would go up there on weekends. And although my parents would, they want us to go hiking or things like that, as soon as the evening hit, we would almost always be just playing D&D like all weekend if we could. And that was really our bonding. We bonded over that stuff. We wanted to, my brother wanted to kind of explore through as many different adventure modules as we could, and the ability to make him laugh, the ability to surprise and entertain him was just one of the most enjoyable things, for me as a player. And it kind of primed me for the kind of storytelling and entertainment and stuff that I wanted to do. I wanted to make things that, entertain people. I wanted to engage people and excite them and surprise them and stuff like that. And trying to figure out the best way to do that and make a career of it has been a lifelong kind of vocation. Just, I've gone through various phases of my career, and this one now, like this ongoing one as a writer, is the one that really stuck. But it's kind of got the most core traits of the things I love, which is, working with other amazing people, dealing with art, dealing with stories, and getting to interact with nerddom. And so it's kind of all of it jammed together. Comics has been the thing that has really kind of taken off, but none of it would have happened without gaming. So
Yeah.
they just feel kind of intrinsically tied together for me. And I always tell people that, like, my gaming background is sort of like my secret weapon. Like when I'm coming up with stories, I'm role playing. I'm either the dungeon master, or I'm the players, or some combination where I'm putting these pieces together and I'm trying to create these stories. So I feel like they're just intertwined in such a way now that I it's hard for me to separate them and to think of them as distinctly separate things, because they're not. Like I'm a gamer, hardcore tabletop gamer, and then I'm also, this comic book guy,
Yeah.
and getting to play in both those realms is the greatest thing ever.
And there's a lot of crossover between those just in general because when you
For
go into a
sure.
comic book store, very often you see the D&D corner,
Yeah.
you see the
Yeah.
RPG corner, you see, that stuff. Same with Magic the Gathering, right? A
Totally.
lot of people like
Totally.
Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, the card games, all
Hmm.
that stuff. You kind of see those all in the same sphere. So it's kind of hard not to have at least a foot in one or the other when you're a fan of them.
Well, I feel like, I mean, gaming is probably, has less of a cultural footprint for people than comic books, especially now
Yeah.
with the movie stuff and everything else. But if you're a gamer, you probably like comic books. Like that's a pretty easy flow as far as that
Right.
goes. And yet the weirdest thing for me is I've written more kind of game related comics than anyone else in the industry, which is really kind of surreal. Like I've written more D&D comics than
Right.
anyone, and then other games as well. Like one of my first work for hire writing gigs, I did an Exalted, mini series based on the White Wolf RPG.
Yeah.
I've done stuff on, Pathfinder. I did a big run on that as well. But then all sorts of, kind of related stuff, whether it's sword and sorcery or fantasy or supernatural stuff. It's all just jammed together for
Yeah.
me in that really big, crazy way.
Do you remember your first comic book, and do you still have it?
I mean, obviously, when you're growing up, you're reading like whatever comic strips in the newspaper,
Right.
Garfield and
Yeah.
Calvin and Hobbes and things like that. But and I would see like there was a magazine called The Electric Company, and that would have Spidey super stories in it and
Okay.
stuff like that. I watched the Spider-Man cartoon, but actually collecting, I can tell you the first comic I bought with my own money, which is Amazing Spider-Man number 231.
Okay.
And I started collecting Amazing Spider-Man. I was one of those Spidey kids, and my brother and I would eventually kind of split the Marvel universe in twain, like as much as possible. We were trying to get as many books as we could. So he was buying the mutant books. So he was
Okay.
buying X-Men and X Factor and New Mutants and stuff like that. And then I was buying all the Spider-Man stuff I could get my hands on. I would occasionally be buying Avengers or Hulk or Fantastic Four. The one mutant book I started buying was Excalibur because it had like that magical bent, and I really
Yeah.
love that stuff as well. So just anything we could get our hands on. We are books that we were regularly buying, and then if there was a cool cover or there was a crossover with a character that I loved, or things like that, we would try and snap up as much of those things as we could, and then digging through back issue bins or going to flea markets and trying to get back issues of stuff. It's totally different now because of the access of digital and trade paperbacks. You can read all of those old stories. Whereas for me, it was like they would see that little caption with the asterisks and it would tell you a story took place in an older issue of the
Yeah.
comic. And that was like ancient history because those back issues were too expensive. I would never get to read them in person. So something like the official handbook of the Marvel Universe, that was so potent for me because it became this codified encyclopedia of knowledge, that all this stuff was interconnected, and it was written in a way that made it seem like it was all planned out. And of
Yeah.
course it wasn't. These were all creations of hundreds of different writers and artists coming up with these things on the fly. But to a kid, it feels like there's this age for, I don't know, like young nerds, well, but people in general. I think people do it about sports, they do it about, they want, when you're a kid at a certain age, you want to codify things, right? You
Right.
want to know what the limits are. So whether it's kids obsessing over every Pokemon, or nowadays whatever, playing Minecraft and wanting to understand every aspect of how that thing works and how
Yeah.
you can build and you can do, whether it's a video game or it's a sports team or it's the Marvel universe or it's Dungeons and Dragons, you pour yourself into something and becoming the expert at it, or gleaning all that knowledge becomes a core part of, you at that formative age. And for me, it was like those two things in tandem. It was the Marvel universe and the official handbook of the Marvel universe, and then it was, D&D and role-playing games, and throwing ourselves into those kind of two big amazing worlds was the greatest. And now to have those so deeply influencing me, like, and the D&D side of it spun off into all sorts of other things. There were these choose your own adventure books in England called Fighting Fantasy. I don't know if you've ever
Yeah.
seen
Yeah.
them.
I've heard that's come up
Absolutely
a few
loved
times. Yeah.
those. They were crazy and amazing, and they were like really formative to me. Obviously Conan the Barbarian, the comics, the books, things like that, because my brother was a voracious reader of sword and sorcery novels and science fiction, and I bounced off most of the science fiction, but the sword and sorcery stuff really kind of sunk its teeth into me, and I was really obsessed with whatever, Dragonlance and the original Forgotten Realms novels and all that stuff, but then older kind of pulp stuff as well. So it was a really kind of potent stew that to this day now it's wild to think about how it echoes outwards into everything I do
Yeah.
in terms of my job and in terms of the creative career that I've slowly but surely built.
Well, and a lot of that had
It's
an
quite
influence
amazing.
on Skullkickers too, right?
Oh, of
When you
course.
first
That's
got
the
into
thing
that.
is that Skullkickers was not my first comic, but it was the one that kind of got traction.
Yeah.
That launched in 2010, and it was the first time I was able to sort of people could point at something and go, "Jim's a writer. He comes up with stories and stuff."
Yeah.
And so it was like, yeah, I wanted it to have that kind of bombastic feeling of I'm 8 to 10 years old and I'm playing D&D with my brother and you're breaking everything. Like it's the fantasy world is set out in a very classic kind of way and you just end up bulldozing it because that's what happens with most D&D
Right.
campaigns. They're irreverent and they're wild and they're ridiculous. And so Skullkickers was sort of taking that energy and working with Chris Stevens and eventually Edwin Huang and Misty Coates and our team and sort of saying like this is what I think is fun and ridiculous about fantasy and then put yourselves into it,
Yeah.
whether in terms of design or in terms of concept or in terms of all the stuff that we wanted to do with it and make this wild kind of irreverent take on the on sword and sorcery genre and the feeling that you have at the gaming table without actually making gaming references. Like no one in Skullkickers has a +1 sword and no
Right.
one's talking about their armor class, but you feel that kind of kookiness
Right.
of being in a game and going off the rails with it. Yeah, totally.
How much of that do you think had an influence with you coming into doing D&D comics?
Oh, everything. I mean, Skullkickers, I'd say like cast a magic spell that I am still benefiting from to this very day because by doing Skullkickers, I had done so. I started as an artist. A lot of people won't don't know that I started as an animator as an artist. I had done some artwork for Dungeon and Dragon magazine when Paizo was doing it, but it was still like D&D third edition. And so what happened was I had met Eric Mona, who's the publisher over at Paizo, and he knew of me and we'd met at conventions and hung out but we weren't like really close and then I gave him a copy of Skullkickers because I was giving it to all my kind of gaming friends and
Yeah.
like I hope you like this clearly like this is in my blood like this stuff
Right.
and he read it and he liked it so much he literally messaged me and said, man, if we ever do a Pathfinder comic you've got to be the writer for that. And I said, if you ever do a Pathfinder comic you better friggin' call me. And like almost a year later, I was at Gen Con and he took me out for lunch. And it was this ride thing. We sit down, we grab appetizers or whatever, and he goes, "You're probably not. You don't know why I brought you up for lunch." And I said, "You guys are doing a Pathfinder comic." And he goes, "Who told you?" I said, "No, I'm just. I was really hoping that that would be the case. That literally this prophecy was coming true, and it was." And he invited me to do the book, and that became my first kind of monthly regular comic that I was putting out as a writer. And so because of Pathfinder, I proved myself at a publisher like Dynamite. And then I get on the radar for somewhere like DC Comics, or I start doing stuff over at IDW, which leads to, I eventually I did a couple Batman stories. I did Samurai Jack because of Samurai Jack.
Love
Ted
Samurai
Adams,
Jack,
who,
by the way.
thank you. I was so proud of that book. Ted Adams, the owner of IDW, he was basically like, this is my favorite comic we're publishing. Do you want to do more stuff for us?
Yeah.
What of all the properties we have, what are you interested in? And I said either Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or Dungeons and Dragons. And he goes, well, Kevin Eastman's coming back to do Turtles, so kind of that guy's got priority.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
no guff. He goes, but if you're interested in D&D, let's figure that out. And so we set up a meeting with Wizards. Fifth edition was in development, so it was the perfect time to try and relaunch those comics. Obviously, fifth edition takes off like a rocket.
Right.
And now I'm on the ground floor. I'm doing the new D&D series as fifth edition launches, does really well. Hilariously, my editor for the comic, this wonderful guy, John Barber, who I'd known for years, he was not a D&D guy growing up. And that was a really good thing because he would read the scripts and he would make sure that they could work for anybody, that you didn't
That's
have to be
great.
a
Yeah.
hardcore D&D guy in order to know who the characters were and what was at stake and what this world was all about. But the person approving all the stuff over at Wizards was this guy named Adam Lee, and Adam was head of what they call head of narrative over at Wizards for Dungeons and Dragons, and he was reading my scripts and all the reference material that I was sending to Max Dunbar, the artist, and he was like, "Oh, this guy's one of us. Like he's so deep in the paint for Dungeons and Dragons. So he contacted me directly, which turned into a consulting gig for Wizards of the Coast, and so that just sort of steamrolled. And then from there, I was doing work for D&D all the time. I became kind of the go-to D&D comic guy, but then also other consulting contracts and things that would eventually lead to, the Young Adventurers guides, which are still going, to this day,
Yeah.
like 6 years later, or other behind the scenes kind of media development stuff, or just all kinds of crazy things that I never ever in a million years would have imagined. And all of that stems out of Skullkickers. So it's like it's a clear pathway. That book sets a precedent in terms of the kind of stories I like and the kind of characters and fun that I like to put into my comics. And because of that, it's almost like Hollywood casting. You're telling people the kind of movies you want to be in, and then you get cast in more of those movies.
Yeah.
And sometimes people are like, "Oh my God, don't you get sick of sword and sorcery and dragons and all that?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? This is literally what I'm here for.
Right.
This is what
Like,
I grew
yeah.
up on.
Yeah, for sure.
Magic, sorcery, fantasy, supernatural stuff. This is my jam. This is what I love." And again, you see that clear through line. I did a series called Wayward over at Image, and that was about these teenagers fighting against the supernatural and kind of all their internal drama. And because of that, I end up doing the Champions, team book over at Marvel. And it's like you show the industry what you are capable of, and then they, if there is fertile ground there that they think they can, see you somewhere else in a related area, then hopefully you're able to start getting work in that area. So it's like the more I've been able to prove myself, and then those little lucky breaks, and years of going to conventions and meeting people and showing
Yeah.
my work and building up that fan base, then you have a breakthrough, like starting to work at Marvel on superhero stuff, or eventually the Avengers. And then weird unexpected things like that Rick and Morty crossover series, with Dungeons and Dragons, or the Stranger Things graphic novel, or getting to do Conan the Barbarian, which is now the weirdest, most amazing thing, where I get to say I'm the
Right.
flagship writer of Conan the Barbarian,
Which is really
and
cool.
and
Back to the
just
sword and
like
sorcery, right?
yeah, stare off into the cosmos, like how could this possibly have ever happened? But what an incredible, phenomenal, opportunity, and an amazing way to um like it makes sense
Right.
and yet it doesn't, if that it makes sense when I look at it as a pathway of, oh, because of that this happened, and because
Yeah.
I met this person, they recommended me for that gig, or they really enjoyed what I did here, or I did a really good job on this project, and so then so and so. But in the midst of it all, it still seems like just an unbelievable whirlwind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned doing the Avengers, and
Yeah.
a lot of people give you so much credit for the Thunderbolts comics you worked on and everything.
Oh, thanks.
And
Yeah.
I'm not looking for anything that you might know. I just want
Right.
your opinion. Are you excited for
Oh,
the
about the
Thunderbolts to
movie?
have a
Oh,
movie and them to
sure.
work on
Yeah.
the young Avengers, and maybe seeing some of your stuff if they do
Sure,
that?
sure. I mean, it's one of those surreal things. Like when you're working on the stuff at Marvel, your goal is obviously, I'm going to tell the best damn stories I can,
Yeah.
and just trying to make cool character stuff. And I had this funky thing where, as I was working on my first few Marvel things, the Marvel MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, is really blowing up in a huge way. That first Avengers movie was such a massive explosion, and then
Yeah.
Disney buys Marvel, and the expansion was so rapid at that point. And so you start seeing, okay, well, they're doing Civil War, and that's like approximately 10 years earlier than what, the stuff that we were doing contemporarily at that point. And so you're like, well, maybe 10 years later they'll be keying into some of the stuff we're doing, but you can't worry about that. Like that's
Right.
not,
Right.
it's cool as a concept, but like I made a bunch of new heroes and villains and things because I thought they were cool ideas.
Right.
And you're like, well, if those can show up somewhere, that's great. But the reality is that that's, the toy box for the cinematic universe is such a different kind of a place. And so your goal is just like, all right, we're telling cool stories in the Marvel universe. And I grew up on the comics, so that's the continuity I care most about. If I can do something that clearly speaks to ideally both audiences, something that is, if you're watching the movies, you can see the characters that you love, but you also, if you grew up on the comics, I'm your guy, like I'm in that space doing those things. That's the ideal, and I feel sort of the same way with Conan the Barbarian, where I'm trying to tell a very classic pulp Robert E. Howard influenced version of this character, but you're seeing clear notes of like Roy Thomas's Bronze Age, comics that I grew up on and that I love, and Savage Sword magazine that, is so important to so many readers. And then it's like, but every so often there's a little Easter egg to the movie
Yeah.
because everyone knows that and everyone loves it. But on the other hand, well, not everyone. I mean, some of the literary fans, I think it's not a great adaptation of the original Robert E. Howard Conan stories, but it's a thoroughly entertaining movie, and
Right.
it's such a huge part of the pop culture kind of shape of Conan now that you'd be foolish to ignore it. And so it's like, okay, can I incorporate some of those ideas without ever wrecking the original kind of literary canon? In the same way with the superhero stuff, can I, put in elements of the movie-esque kind of things, but still make sure that you still see the character from the comic origin?
Yeah.
That's a really long-winded way of saying, yeah, like it's cool. I'm really excited. It's neat. It's like a little surreal. I haven't had anything sort of adapted over to the cinematic
Yet.
universe yet.
Yet.
So
Yet.
yeah. Let's not say it'll never happen. So I'm in that weird sort of headspace of, I think when it happens, that's cool. Or when you see that little special thanks credit kind of roll up, you'll be like, oh, that's neat. It's not going to change your life. It's more just like, oh, that's a fun little bit. Like when Infinity War was coming out, I was co-writing Avengers. And so, the biggest media movie of the year, and I'm co-writing the comic at that point,
Yeah.
and it was just mind-blowing. Like Canadian news picked up on it, and I was doing radio and television and newspapers, and like it was just this wild ride of talking about superhero stuff. And my parents are not nerdy at all, and most of my family is not nerdy at all, and they were even like, oh, look, Jim's in the Toronto Star. It's like how did this happen?
Yeah.
This is ridiculous.
I get excited,
And
and
so,
I know the fans get excited when they see something that somebody they
oh,
like
of
get up.
course, yeah,
When they did the Hawkeye series, and everyone's like, "Oh,
right,
all this, that I can't believe they adapted all that stuff." Or
yep,
even
yep.
little slim things that people slip in there.
Oh,
That's all
totally.
the small reference. Somebody's
You got
like an
it.
Ed Greenwood, and the D&D movie comes out, and he's like, "Oh, that one little thing there. This was one really little
Yep.
cool thing." So as an audience, we get excited not just for the show, not just for the movie, but also to go. They reference this one thing, this
Right.
comic book writer, this creator put in there.
Oh,
That is so
absolutely.
cool.
I think that's the nice thing, is that there's enough people now in the industry, in Hollywood, in all these different spaces doing
Yeah,
video games, who are genuine fans of the original source material, and they want to do right by it, rather than, I feel like in the 70s, 80s, even the 90s, there was that sort of feeling of, oh, Hollywood knows better, and they're going to kind of
right.
pave over as much of that source material as they can, because they think they're just going to do the whatever, the most iconic version. And it's like, actually the most iconic version is the source material.
Yeah.
But so the closer you hew to that, and the more careful you are about using those elements wisely, the more the fans will reward you for it. Absolutely.
Let's go back, comparing your
Sure.
early, coming into the industry and coming into it, and then
Right.
comparing it to now. What were some big challenges and hurdles you had coming in to the comic book industry? And what are
Um,
your now that you're
yeah.
established? What are your new challenges?
Right. So, good question. Starting off, it was just a matter of being visible on a regular basis. Like you're trying to put out material on a regular basis that people are seeing you, and they're remembering your name, and they're remembering the book,
Mhm.
so the reality is, and this is true of any creative industry, this is not a comic specific thing or a gaming specific thing, no one is going to pay you to do creative work until you create creative work worth paying for, until you have a portfolio of samples, or you are putting out work that they can easily see a parallel, where they're like, not only is hiring this person a great idea, but they are going to benefit us, whether that's in terms of the quality of the work, in terms of the visibility of the work, in terms of, whatever it might be. And so something like Skullkickers was so incredibly valuable, because we were putting out a mostly monthly comic. Like we were
Yeah.
doing 5 issues on, and then we would have a small break, and then 5 issues on. So we'd be putting out between 8 and 10 issues a year. And before that, I would go for 7 8 months without I'd have one story in a comic anthology, or I'd have like a little backup story somewhere or whatever. um so just that regularity is so valuable, and you're getting better as a matter of practice, but you're also proving, look, I can put out work as good as what you're putting out at the major publishers on my own, with this team that we've put together, imagine what I could do for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if you're enjoying this and it's fun and it's entertaining. And that's honestly the toughest part, is just breaking free of the pack, or just proving that you're going to kind of, it sounds awkward, but I don't know how else to put it. Like, I'm going to do this whether or not you pay me, so you might as well pay me. I know
Yeah.
that sounds kind of
Yeah.
weird. Like I'm going to be around this industry, and you're going to keep seeing me at conventions. You're going to keep seeing my name on books, and you're going to keep seeing me creating stuff, and the quality is consistent or getting better all the time. And I am reliable and strong and fun, and people like what I'm doing. And that sounds really weird to say it in those terms, but that's essentially what you're doing. And nowadays you've got multiple outlets to do that. If you're doing, artwork online, but you're putting out amazing artwork all the time, or you're doing a web comic or anything like that, it doesn't there's less biases. When I was starting out, something like having a DeviantArt page was considered like really kind of gauche, because it was like, oh, professionals don't post on that fan arty site. You know what I mean? And now it's just like, do you have a following? Do you have an audience? Do you
Yeah.
have quality? That is all that matters. You know what I mean? Like, something like a Patreon, I feel like at the very start there was a sort of a weird sense of, well, a professional would never, bang a tin cup digitally and say, hey, you want to give me a couple bucks? And now it's just sort of like, who cares? Like, whatever format, whatever audience you build, however you're putting work out into the world, if there are people enjoying it and if you are making good work, that's way more important than some sort of weird filter in terms of how you got your start, or even where you live. Like,
Yeah.
because of the internet, you could be anywhere. And I'm working with artists all the time, all around the world. When Stephen Cummings and I were doing Wayward together, he's in Japan and I'm in Toronto, and it's like, he's getting ready to send his kids off to school, and I'm going to go to bed in a few hours. Like, we're having a meeting quickly, and chatting on Skype or whatever, and then go to work. And I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning, and it's like the elves worked on the shoes. Like, the artwork got done overnight, and all of a sudden I got a new page or something. Like, that's what was so cool about it. It does not matter. Those limitations are kind of no longer in place. So then, to the second part of your question, we're asking like, what's hard now?
Yeah.
It's sort of like trying to, I mean, Conan is a huge part of my output right now.
Right.
And I'm trying to make work I'm proud. You're always trying to make work you're proud of. So me saying that is almost pointless. But this idea of, I want to make this really long, epic, mythic run on the series that people will remember fondly and that will stick around, and kind of reframe my career in that sense of, if you put me on something, give me some space and let me cook,
Yeah.
and I can make something really cool. Because so much of the industry right now feels like it's mini series and quick launch, quick cancellation kind of stuff. And the fear that a lot of publishers have in terms of making a mark and making instant sales. That's where the relaunch stuff, that
Right.
that recycle, reboot kind of thing is constant, and the endless variant covers to try and capitalize on a new number one. But you're like, that becomes a cycle of diminishing returns. And so what people really want is, they want to get behind something and they want to stick with something. If you give them quality and you give them longevity, and it, you know, prove to them that they're getting their cover price worth every single month, build that readership rather than just sort of cash in and go. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? And so if I can prove to people, both myself, obviously Heroic Signatures and Titan, the people who are doing Conan, but now whatever, Marvel, DC, anybody else, just like, Jim's got big, cool ideas. He can build worlds. He can do long-term drama. Just don't cut him off at the knees,
Right.
and watch what happens. That's
Let
kind
the
of,
let the story
that's my hope.
build.
Yeah, and so it's like this thing of, I'm not doing this, I can't worry about what comes next, because year to year the industry is constantly changing, and opportunities will come up this year that I never could have imagined, and projects will get canceled and other things will
Right.
will come up. That's the thing about being in the industry on such a long term. I'm coming up on my writing career is like whatever, about 15 years, but I've been in the broader industry for like closer to 25. And so it's like, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to be
Yeah.
still, you're going to see me at whatever, San Diego Comic Con and Gen Con, New York Comic Con most years, Fan Expo Canada every year. Like I'm going to be here. I'm going to be making books. And we always have these kind of highs and lows of our careers, you know? Um, really amazing moments, and you try and celebrate them as much as you can. And then you have times when things just aren't working, or the stars aren't in alignment, and whatever may have you. But it's like, I'm not in this industry short term. I'm not just get in, get out. This is, what I've made my life
Yeah.
out of.
It's what you love.
Right. Like, without trying to sound crass, this bookshelf, this narrow bookshelf here, floor to ceiling, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 shelves. It continues off camera. Those are all my books, like literally books I've written.
Yeah.
There's like 70 graphic novels plus foreign editions and omnibuses and all that kind of stuff.
Which is
Like,
awesome.
it's insane. Like, the first time I think I filled one shelf, I thought it'll never get, bigger than this.
Yeah. How awesome
And
is
it's
that?
like,
I'd do
right.
the same thing, right?
Well, you have to, right? You got to celebrate those victories and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, that to me is sort of this weird milestone of like, I'm here, I'm not going anywhere, I'm going to keep making books, I'm going to keep doing what I love. I would love to do that with you, as a publisher, as a artist, as a whoever.
Yeah.
But if not, that's cool. I've got enough other people, I'll do it over there.
Right.
So, and that's kind of a good thing now that I've finally built up enough of a backlist and a reputation where it's like you were sort of saying at the start, the people that love working with me or speak highly of me, that will last
Yeah.
more than any, rough project or any weird kind of experience. You're like, you have a couple people you don't jive with, and you're like, okay, but that's the nature of things.
Right.
But the long-term arc is, I'm doing good work, and I'm going to be here. So yeah, if
Speaking of
that
all the
kind of makes
people, you
sense.
mentioned earlier that
Yeah,
there were people how amazing it was. There were people that you looked up
sure.
to, and then you're working with them.
Yeah,
Can you name some of the people that you really looked up to growing up, and then you're like,
sure.
you got to meet them and work with them, and maybe tell us a story about one of those incidents?
Totally. I mean, I've got people that a lot of industry people that I've had the chance to meet. Someone like Ed Greenwood's a perfect example. You grow up, all of us grew up. If you play D&D, the Forgotten Realms, and Ed's, like a legend and things like that, or like I Bob Salvatore, like R.A. Salvatore,
Yeah.
right? Like, I grew up reading those books, all of his stuff, and not just Drizzt Do'Urden, like everything that he was doing. I was a huge fan of his things, and getting to meet him, Tracy Hickman, Tracy and Laura Hickman, who did the original Ravenloft stuff, or Margaret Weiss and Tracy, who did Dragonlance. Like,
Yeah.
those are people that I grew up reading those books, and they're highly formative to me. And now, like most years at Gen Con, I share a booth with Tracy and with Howard Taylor, who's this sci-fi cartoonist who's I've known for years.
Yeah.
And it's like mind bending when I
Yeah.
think about it. Or I go to Gary Con a few weeks ago, and just friends of mine in the industry, people like Eric Mona, who I mentioned previously, or Jeff Richards, who's head of Chaosium, or last year I went to Gary Con for the 50th anniversary, and I got to meet Errol Otis, who's this amazing first edition D&D artist whose work is really creepy and funky and very distinctive. And I got to hang out with him and chat with him, and it was just like, could you ever in a million years have imagined that this would be the case? 2019, I got to meet Roy Thomas, who's written more Conan than anyone else and brought Conan into
Yeah.
comics. And we had a wonderful little conversation at Paris Comic Con in France. And you're like, first of all, I'm in France
Yeah.
thanks to comics. I'm getting to see this city and have this experience. I'm getting to meet one of my kind of, writing heroes. And then he mentioned that he had read one of my Conan stories and really enjoyed it. And you're just like, what is even happening? Like,
Right.
how can this even be? When I was doing Avengers, I got to co-write with Mark Waid, who, the guy who wrote
Yeah.
Kingdom Come and has done legendary runs on so many characters I can't even list them
Right.
all. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like, and we get along great. We're good friends now because of it. And Al Ewing, who's this phenomenal, we're kind of contemporary talent, the two of us, but he is this big, amazing cosmic thinker who's got these phenomenal ideas. And he's such a good team player and such a joy to interact with. And you're like, this was our team. We were the Avengers. We were putting together this storyline for this weekly event that we did called No Surrender, that was coming out right around Infinity War, and you're just like, okay, this is the job, this is what, we're doing today. And you have those pinch me moments, but on the other hand, you're also thoroughly proud, and you know that you've got something cool to bring to the table, that it's
Yeah.
not like, sure, there's moments when I was feeling like, man, am I the weakest link or whatever, but for the most part you're like, no, I kind of, like, I know what I can do, or I feel good about the energy that we've got in the room, and let's make this thing. So
We often
yeah,
talk
just
with a lot
love
of
it.
the guests, especially contemporary guests in different
Sure.
industries, about the thought of imposter syndrome. And
Sure.
I was told by one of my friends in the industry. They said people wouldn't be there if they didn't deserve to be there.
I mean, there's always, you can point it at examples of weak work, or you can look and say, well, it's nepotism or whatever may have you, right? And I get those impulses, or I understand those things. It's really more the other side of the coin, where people are like, why haven't I been given my shot, or stuff like that. Once you're in the thick of it, it's this weird feeling of, look, people ask me, they go, do you get imposter syndrome? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you get writer's block? Yes, totally. 100%. I get, almost every project, I have that moment where I'm like, oh, I'm trash. This isn't working. What am I supposed to be doing? The difference is, and this is really, really, really important, is that because I've come out the other side so many times, because there's a bookshelf of books there,
Mm-hmm.
instead of going, oh crap, I'm not meant to do this, or I suck at this, I go, oh, this is the part of the process where I think I suck again. Like, I thought I was going to escape it this time, but here it is again, looming over my shoulder. You know what I mean? And so the difficult thing is that if people haven't been through that before, I think they get that feeling and they go, oh, I shouldn't feel like this if I'm a real writer,
Yeah.
real artist, real whatever. Therefore, I must not be. Do you know what I mean? And so they stop doing it. They go, well, that they think that making art or making stories, or creative things should always feel incredibly inspiring, and it should be like lightning is shooting out of your fingertips, or your, whatever you imagine up here is down on the page, because you're a real artist, or whatever may have you.
Yeah.
And that's just not reality, but it's the romanticized version of it that has been created by whatever Hollywood, and people mythically talking about the act of creation, and kind of playing up their hits and never talking about their misses. You know what I mean? And so I think it's important to kind of tell people the truth as much as I can. Like, yes, I do actually work really hard, and that doesn't mean that I haven't been fortunate. I've been very, very,
Yeah.
very fortunate. I've been very thankful, and I've had people go to bat for me, and I've tried to help other people as much as I can. And you you don't always get what you deserve, but
Right.
on the other hand, if you are a good person, and you are organized, and you are hardworking, you can capitalize on every one of those amazing opportunities that comes your way, or at least make the most of as many of them as you can. And so that's kind of how I feel about it. I never want it to be like, I'm not one of those people who believes like, this is my destiny or
Right.
something like that, because I feel like that's a disservice, because what that says is, oh, so if someone doesn't get to do it, that they didn't work hard. Do you
Right.
know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
it's something, I was in Seattle for Emerald City Comic Con, like, I guess just about a month ago, and this gentleman beelined over to my table at one point, and he says, it's my destiny to write Conan the Barbarian. And I'm like, how do you want me to respond to this?
Yeah.
Right? Like I'm here right now, and this is my job, and I love it. I'm going to do it as long as I can and do the best job I can. Clearly you're passionate about this too. Like, do you just want my job? Like, how am I supposed to, do you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And that doesn't mean that he's not worthy, or he'll never do it, or anything like that. But right now, there's one person who's doing the flagship, and there's other people who get to write stories, and they do anthology stuff or whatever. But I've got my hand on the steering wheel, and I don't begrudge other people wanting to do it. But on the other hand, it's like, I got the baton right now, and I'm running as hard as hell, and trying to do everything I can with it. And so I think it comes from an honest place, where people want to just, again, that romanticized sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you dream it big enough, and you say it, and whatever, visualize it, it will happen. And it's like, I'm sure that's part of the overall exercise of the thing. But on the other hand, there's still an element of like you're not always going to get to do with you what you want.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's only so many people that get to whatever, write Spider-Man or Batman or
Right.
work on D&D or any of those things. And what's more important is to create stuff that you feel exemplifies those elements. Like if I never got to write Conan the Barbarian, I still wrote Skullkickers and Pathfinder and eventually D&D and these other things that are deeply influenced by the pulp stuff of
Yeah.
Robert E. Howard and Fritz Lieber and all these other authors that I love, whether or not I got to do whatever the official stuff.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And that's almost more important than needing to get the check mark that you did it for real or
Yeah.
whatever may have you. But it's even easier for me to say that than someone who,
Yeah.
never gets that chance.
Yeah.
And so it's really a difficult, weird kind of thing where you want to be as supportive and enthusiastic as possible. But on the other hand, it's also your career and it's
Yeah.
your kind of goals. And you're trying to both be supportive of friends and help everyone else or be welcoming. But on the other hand, you're also kind of you can't help but be a little bit protective and just sort of be
Yeah.
like, well, I'm doing this thing right now and I'm trying to make the best damn version of it if I can.
Yeah. Speaking of Conan, a
Yeah.
lot of people talk about how when they read what you've been putting out, that it's really
Mhm.
cool because you fit older stuff in and you harken
Thank you.
back to some of the previous
Yeah.
stuff. Yet you make it your own, and I think
Right.
that's really a cool way of looking at it. And all of the people that really enjoy what you're putting out right now for Conan is
Thank you.
you've got your own story, you're doing your own stuff, but
Yeah.
yet they can see Robert E. Howard in what you're working on.
Totally.
They can see the
And
previous people.
yeah, that source material, the Robert E. Howard original pulp stories, but also the Bronze Age kind of comics that
Yeah.
are so formative to the pop culture kind of vision of the character. I wanted to sort of, we had this unique opportunity with the new Titan series to kind of say, okay, there's 50 years worth of Conan comics. There's 90 years worth of publishing in and around Conan. What are the things you have to keep and what are the things you streamline and what are the things that haven't quite been done before? And and figure those out. And it's easy to say it and it's hard to do it. And I'm so thankful that I'd written, I did the Conan Red Sonja miniseries at Dark Horse with Gail Simone, drawn by Dan Panosian, who did a phenomenal job. I did, Conan at Marvel. But most of the Conan stuff I did at Marvel was during lockdowns and the pandemic.
Yeah.
And it just like kind of fell off the radar because understandably everyone had other things on their mind at the time.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was going to be the last chance for me to write Conan. And all of a sudden, I get this phenomenal new opportunity. I pitched against other writers for the gig. I got the gig again, unbelievably. And then it was like, well, I cannot, like, I have to make the most of this. Like, I cannot screw this up
Right.
because this is such an amazing, phenomenal opportunity, and we've just got to make the most of it. And we did. It launched summer of 2023, and we've been roaring kind of ever since, and trying to put as much of my love for the character in the world into those stories, but not compromising in terms of making really badass Conan stories. We've got a mature reader's book so we can really push the envelope in terms of that pulp storytelling, violence and sexy, cool and powerful, um and setting a really high bar for ourselves at every turn. That I think one of the things that has been done, almost like all the Robert E. Howard stories have been adapted very well in comics, and they're beautiful and they're really well done. So if we just did them again, you would have an impossibly hard time getting excitement
Yeah.
because the readers would go, well, I know how Tower of the Elephant ends. Well, I know where Red Nails goes. And they're great stories, but you can only tell them so many times before either you have to take a radical departure, at which point people are like, wait, that's not how the story goes. You've ruined it.
Yeah.
Or you're just seeing it again. And even if it's beautifully done, it's like, all the beats, all the motions. So I had to sort of say, okay, we have to tell stories that take place in between those canon tales, but they have to be just as important. They have to be just as epic. They have to be just and that is a really cocky thing to say. Like,
Yeah.
we got to do another story that's as good as Tower of the Elephant, one of the most important and influential sword and sorcery stories of all time. And I don't know that we'll ever do it, but if we don't try, then we'll never even get close. We have to shoot for it every single time. We have to make it like the stories that happen in between Howard's tales are not disposable. They're not perfunctory. They're not Conan goes into a tower and kills an evil wizard and gets a hot girl. Like that can't be the depth and breadth of what we've got to show you. We have to go deeper mythically. We have to go deeper psychologically. We have to get to the heart of what makes this character an icon and push and push and push every single month. Otherwise, why the hell am I here? And if I'm not going to do that, I better get the hell out of the way and find someone else who can, you know?
Yeah, that's awesome. Is there a plan to take the current comic books and put them in a like a combined, so somebody who's new that comes in on, say,
Oh, totally. So
halfway
there's
through?
already trade paperbacks. Yeah. So there's collected editions of each story arc, and then they're going to do larger ones, I'm sure, down the way. But yeah, each story arc has already been collected. We've got 4 volumes out of the main monthly series. There's also the first kind of event miniseries I did called Battle of the Blackstone, and that came out in the fall. And literally, the trade paperback of that came out, I think, like last week. So we've got a really awesome, aggressive schedule, 12 issues monthly a year. And then each fall, we're doing like an event mini series of 4 issue. So this year's event mini series is called Scourge of the Serpent. It's the year of the snake. It's just great, synergy all the way across. So all the Stygian stuff is kind of coming to the forefront. And we've got this really cool, twisty story of, Set the snake god and what is the grand plan that the Stygians have for the Hyborian age, and inadvertently the rippling effect it has to every age connected to it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
In addition to Conan, which you guys can go and listen to or go and get right now, go and read. You're
Yeah.
listening to the show. Go and read those. Do you have any other projects that you're working on right now? Things that you could talk about to our audience and let
That's
them
the
know?
difficult part. So I'm doing more. My
Yeah,
wife
don't
and I
get
write
yourself in
these.
trouble.
Yeah, I know. My wife and I do these things called the Young Adventurers Guides for Dungeons and Dragons,
Mm-hmm.
and they've been really successful. We started off with what was supposed to be 3 books in 2019, and now we're working on, like book 9 and beyond. And so it's been this real success story. They've got this great form factor for kids. They're in like I think 6 languages now, so we get fan mail from kids all over the world who are this is their entry point for Dungeons and Dragons. We've even found adults have found them really really useful for getting into the hobby. So because they strip out all the kind of the rules of D&D, and they get you to just this narrative focus. The reality is, if you're going to play D&D for the first time, you're almost certainly going to be doing it with other people who are more experienced. It's not like when we were kids and someone picks up whatever the basic set, and everyone sits in a circle and goes, I don't know how any of this works.
Right.
You can watch YouTube videos now, or you're almost certainly going to be playing with someone who's an experienced
Yeah.
dungeon master or player. And so it's less important for you to know all your rules and statistics. What's most important is for you to bring your ideas and your excitement and the choices that you're going to make. What kind of character do you want to play? What kind of personality does that character have? And a lot of the things I felt were really intrinsic to what made D&D fun for me as a kid at that same formative age that we're trying to reach, and codifying that in these books. Great, beautiful new artwork, really simple visual guidebooks that you could open at any point and understand what the worlds of D&D are about and what you do as a hero traversing those realms. And they've been great. They've been a really cool thing. The best compliment I've gotten is from Ed Greenwood, and he can be incredibly hyperbolic at times, but
Right.
it was just my heart swelled when he said to me, he goes, if we had these books in the 80s, there wouldn't have been a satanic panic. Like,
Yeah.
it was just like, man, that is the coolest thing you could have said.
Yeah. Ed always
So there's
seems to know exactly the right things to say
Oh yeah,
when you
he's
when you
great.
need them.
Right? And so we've got that. I'm doing other stuff for D&D in general. I've got other projects that I'm contributing to that I can't announce yet. So I've got more comic books in the works, and I've got a new creator-owned book that I'm slowly kind of building towards, which it's been a long time coming. I think I wanted to have a new creator-owned book out even a couple years ago, and it's just sort of been that thing where other stuff keeps kind of getting in the way, and you go, okay, this has to be a priority. I have to make stuff that the artist and I co-own together, and that we're going to get out to the market. So that's another thing that I've kind of got on my plate. I was teaching for a long, long time, and I stepped away from my teaching job so I can focus 100% on my creative career and writing. And it's given me better work-life balance. It's given me more opportunity to travel, and it gives me a little more room to take on, different kind of writing gigs. So it's an exciting time right now.
That's awesome. And you're going to Mumbai.
I am, yeah, going to India. It's the craziest thing. Like I said, I've traveled. I've been to China, I've been to Japan, I've been through, the
France.
UK, right? France, obviously. I've been to Europe. I went to South Africa once. I've like the number of places I've been able to travel thanks to comics is kind of mind bending to me. And this is a brand new adventure. So I'm going to go to Mumbai Comic Con for 2 days this weekend. Going to get to see the country, see the city a little bit, and see superhero and RPG fans on the other side of the world. And already I've gotten a lot of great messages from people who are looking forward to meeting me, and it's going to be absolutely surreal. I cannot wait, and I'm that trepidatious kind of nervous quality right now as I'm looking forward to the flight, but also it's 21 hours of travel, and you're just like, all right, brace yourself for this kind of wild and crazy adventure.
That's awesome. People listening, that's going to be April 12th through the 13th. If you're over on that side, I know we
Yuppers.
have a few listeners on that side. I don't know if they're in
Amazing.
nearby Mumbai, but if they can get
Right.
over there, they can make the little trek. But you're also going to be at the Calgary Expo, April
Yep.
24th through the 27th at Stampede
I'm
Park in
there
Calgary.
pretty much every year. I lived in Alberta for a couple years, and so going back there is a wonderful opportunity to see some friends, and just it's like the second biggest show in Canada, and it's always a great time.
You're going to also be Free Comic Book Day at Third Eye Comics in
Oh yeah.
Annapolis, right? That's
Yep.
going to be May
Yep.
3rd.
That is one of the most amazing comic book stores I have ever been to. Every time I do a signing there, it's an absolute banger. And Ray Fox and I are going to be there for Free Comic Day, and it's going to be a riot.
That's awesome. You guys, do you have anything coming up for Free Comic Book Day that you
I
can mention?
do. So we've got a Conan book. So the
Okay.
Scourge of the Serpent Prelude issue will be out that day. The artist Ivan Gill is a new guy who hasn't done Conan before, but he's going to grab the fan base. I guarantee. His environments are lush and beautiful. His artwork is so incredible, and he's just doing a phenomenal job. And yeah, the book is going to be really, really sweet. I got my print copies of it a couple weeks ago, and I cannot wait for it to be in the hands of Conan fans all around the world.
That's sweet. Of course, you're going to be at Gamehole Con. That's right down the road
Yep.
from me in Madison, Wisconsin. Not necessarily one state over for me in Madison, Wisconsin, October 16th
Right.
through the 19th. And of course, D&D in a castle. How
D&D
cool
in a
is that?
castle. Yeah, I did it last year for the first time. I had an absolute blast, and they invited me back, and so I'm back again in November. I have a bunch of other conventions I'm going to be doing throughout the summer, but I don't put them on my website until they get confirmed.
Yeah,
So I've got a couple shows I'm really excited to announce next week. I'm going to be, yeah, heading all over the place. I'll be a lot of Canadian shows, a lot of international shows, a lot of different cool things, getting to meet people, some of my favorite cities, some of my favorite people. It's going to be awesome.
that's really awesome. Yeah, I'm excited for all of those. Hopefully, I can get over to Gamehole Con. If not, I'm sure I'll see you at one of these
It's such a
other
good
events down
time.
the road.
It is so sweet.
Of course, people can find you at jimzub.com,
Yep.
patreon.com/jimzub. You're all over social media. Your website has a long list. Just a few of them. Facebook, you're at /jimzub. Blue Sky at jimzub.bluesky.social.
The
Dot dot
easiest
dot
is
dot dot.
just go to jimzub.com. That's
Jimzub.com.
the website I've had for 26 years. It's got crazy deep archives that include my original live journal on there. It's got all my social media linked, and there's also tutorials about how to write comics and how to work in the industry. A lot of articles that I did over a decade ago that still get a lot of circulation because all the advice in there is still relevant. So
I think it's really cool. The last episode with James Sutter, he's like, I got in on the Pathfinder comic book and I was working on that, and I had to figure it out. So I went to Jim Zub's website and learned how to become a
so
comic book
awesome.
writer. And I was like,
So
that's
great. Yeah,
great.
James is so great. Yeah, and I've had some really amazing, over the years I've had people tell me, that how useful some of the advice I had given, whether it's on social media or on those tutorials has been, or it's been very heartfelt. I've got just independent books that people have made over the years. They bring it over to me and they go, I pitched this book around the industry and I wasn't getting any traction. And then I read your articles about how to pitch and how to format a pitch. And the minute that I did that, people started to take me seriously. And you're just like, okay, thank God. Like that's the thing, is that sometimes it's not even a lack of quality, it's just organization or
Yeah.
formatting how people expect to see things. And so those are the kind of compliments that really, they're really heartfelt, they're really wonderful, because I want people to be able to make stories, I want people to be able to make the stuff that they love. So
That's
yeah.
awesome. Jims, thank you so much for being here. Of course, we've got the
No
live stream Q&A, question and answer,
Awesome.
coming up here in a bit. So anybody that's in any
Great.
of those live stream chats, YouTube, Twitch, etc., feel free to throw your questions in the chat for Jim, and we will get to them after the show is over. Of course, everybody listening to the podcast, coming up for Epic Realms, legendary D&D author and video game writer Bruce Nesmith is going to be joining us. He's going to be
Cool.
joining us on April 21st. Of course, that podcast will be available on the 22nd. Of course, so many D&D books and novels he's written, but also, one of the main people that did Skyrim. So that's freaking amazing. Also coming up, writer Trevor Bettis is going to be joining us. Kelly Fitzpatrick, Cobalt City creator Nathan Crowder is going to be joining us. So many people on the lineup. So subscribe, follow, rate, review. It helps all of our guests, and in turn also helps us. So thank you guys so much for listening, and we will chat with you later on Epic Realms.